did try to do like a guerrilla on the ground, like out on the Venice boardwalk with like a flosser. People were like, get away from me.
When you think of startups, you think of Silicon Valley. We're going to venture beyond the valley and paint a picture of the startup ecosystem and the innovation that happens right here on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation in New South Wales. We're going to feature diverse founders, investors and operators and hear about their origin stories that shaped them, highlights, lowlights, best practice and their visions for the future. Join me as we get a front seat to witness the phenomenal role of these startup superstars. This special live series of Startup Palette Show is proudly supported by Investment New South Wales. Investment New South Wales drives economic growth and prosperity for the people of New South Wales by bringing together business, government and priority markets to deliver on the government's strategic priorities and boost the state's innovation, industry, investment and trade. We would also like to thank Nakatomi, a venture studio for founders. If you have an ambitious idea that needs to be accelerated, Nakatomi are your people. They'll help you scale your business faster than you can on your own by providing you a best-in-class in-house team of strategists, designers, and engineers to help you validate, develop, and launch your bold ideas with confidence and imagination. If you have a promising pitch, reach out and say NiceTo sent you. Let's get started. Welcome to NiceTo's Startup Palette Show Live. I'm so happy to have you join us, Ellie. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Let's get started with how it was growing up in Alberta.
I'm actually not American. I'm Canadian, born and raised in Western Canada. I grew up in Alberta, which is probably mostly known by Australians as a really great ski place, which it is. It was a beautiful place to grow up. I grew up in a family business household, so really kind of born and raised with entrepreneurship in my blood. But I ended up leaving Canada pretty young. I found a Fulbright fellowship and went down to the States, and that kind of kick-started about a decade plus in the States for me.
And what did you learn? How involved were you in the family business?
Growing up, I mean, we were pretty hands-on. It was a very classic mom-and-pop shop family business that I grew up in, and it was pretty diverse. My dad, really, it was kind of this very old school version of private equity, like buy a small company, make it profitable, sell it, buy a different company, make it profitable, sell it, buy a different company, make it profitable, each time kind of like growing and adding to it, and then maybe adding another store, another location, adding another location. But growing up in Western Canada, it's really like, it's not necessarily like sexy consumer brands. We're talking about like oil and gas town, or especially in the 90s, we're talking about industrial machinery and industrial distribution. So I definitely grew up, whether it was like from a gas station to, in the back shops of like an industrial warehouse, like packing orders and building casters. So I grew up, in, I would say, a pretty diverse ecosystem. But it really, at the end of the day, fundamentally taught me how to think about business, how to think about growing businesses from small to large, and how to think about the business fundamentals across different industries and different sectors, no matter what the business is.
I mean, the unsexy businesses are always like the most stable ones.
Yes, absolutely. But growing up as a kid, I was definitely hands-on in like the summers and things like that. Got more involved in, I would say, in my late teens and 20s, and still a director in the family business today. Yeah.
Great. And you grew up learning professional ballet.
I was a dancer, a pretty competitive dancer. It was a huge part of my life growing up, and I went to a pre-professional program where we all went to school in the day and then everyone went to do their sport in the afternoon. And if you grew up in Alberta and you were, at that time there was a lot of ballet, there was a lot of hockey, and downhill skiing as well. So, all of my friends at that time, everyone was kind of athletes and pretty focused, which meant that I think it really taught me, at that time I think it really taught me a lot of like time management, discipline and self-led learning.
And coming to your career, you had an illustrious career. Several Cannes Awards. How was time working in Ogilvy? This is about consumer brands. And Ogilvy, let's admit, is one of the most creative agencies in the world.
Yeah. I was so lucky to start my career there. It really is an incredible creative agency, not just for the brands that Ogilvy is known for, but also internally. If any of you have actually ever worked in advertising agencies or advertising land, very often the culture and the team is what a lot of people walk away with as saying the most important kind of part of it. And the Ogilvy team and culture is just such an incredible part of that organization. I studied industrial design at university. I didn't actually practice industrial design until much later when I co-founded Flaus and got to do a Harvard product. But at Ogilvy I started in the creative department, And I loved it, but I felt really disconnected from the customer experience and understanding what we were trying to solve for customers. So then I went into the customer experience design and learned sort of the tools of the trade of like personas and journeys and the really deep customer experience design tools, but I felt really disconnected from the business problems we were trying to solve for customers and for clients. And so then I moved into management consulting, and I did sort of like digital transformation and brand transformation work for blue chip businesses. And I think what was so amazing about Ogilvy as a learning ground early on in my career is that I was able to really be entrepreneurial inside of Ogilvy and kind of move through the organization. And really I was met with such open arms to that type of entrepreneurial thinking, and that is such a testament to the type of people that are inside of that organization, both I think from the grassroots level all the way up to the executives. And at the end of my time at Ogilvy, I had the opportunity to sit at the table amongst sort of the C-suite of Ogilvy, redesigning how Ogilvy went to market globally and Ogilvy's brand, organizational design, and capabilities and structure and offering for clients. And you know, it really was a testament to that organization, how it thinks creatively from the inside out.
That's really interesting, especially for a brand that represents all of that. And what was it like looking internally?
Messy, it was messy. I think that's the thing about creatives, is that creative is never linear. And you know, I think the organization reflected that. But I think that a lot of great things happen in the messiness, in the space in between. So I think that if you're the type of person who really wants a very linear structure, it's probably a difficult organization for you because you're like, what's happening, where do I go? But I think also that kind of chaos creates a lot of opportunity as well to do things a little bit differently. Even for such a big, it's a huge agency. I mean, these are sweeping generalizations. Every office is different, but this was my experience.
You've had several businesses of your own, and please tell us all what TINA stands for, because I think that's really cool.
After my time at Ogilvy, I was about 75 years old when I left, and I was ready to retire from agency life. And I was a little burnt out of agency life. You know, there's a lot, at the end of the day, it's a huge organization, and I had just spent a couple of years kind of redesigning and restructuring it, which, if you've ever worked in management consulting and you know how big and slow those ships move, I was pretty, I wouldn't say jaded about agencies, but I was definitely ready to move on from it. I was doing an MBA at the time, and I had all these founders coming to me sort of asking the same questions, like, I have this idea, I don't know where to start, should I pay someone to do the brand, should I do marketing, should I go to market, should I fundraise, should I bootstrap? And so what I did was I formalized into a little bit of an incubator called TINA, which stood for This Is Not an Agency, because I was done with agencies at that time. And I really just, it was my first kind of peek into startup land where I got to help and work with other founders and help navigate what was the best pathway for each different founder. And I got to work with everyone from legal tech, like, you know, B2B SaaS, to food and bev, it was California, so there's a few cannabis brands in there. And one of them was Flaus.
So let's talk about Flaus. Flaus was on Shark Tank, it raised $4 million.
Flaus was the world's first patented electric flosser that makes flossing as quick and easy as brushing your teeth, but with string floss.
Well, there you go. Go get a Flaus. First of all, what brought you into Flaus? Was it the TINA journey?
Absolutely. So Flaus was a client like that I worked with at TINA, and at the time they had done a crowdfunding campaign, and they had very great success. I worked with them through that crowdfunding campaign. It actually ended up performing the top 1% of Indiegogo campaigns of all time. And when I graduated from my MBA at the time, it was kind of a perfect opportunity to bring together all of my different experiences, from my family business to Ogilvy brand marketing to my industrial design background of, you know, actually creating a product. And so I joined Flaus as a co-founder at that time to then, you know, go from the crowdfunding where really it's still just an idea, but with a lot of good backers and excitement, but actually to bring the product into the world. So manufacturing, packaging, distribution, brand, go to market, and everything in between.
I know it all sounds so easy to do.
Very easy.
Very easy. Yeah. What made it one of the most successful Indiegogo campaigns?
I think that, you know, it really resonates at the end of the day. I think that flossing is a funny thing because, like, first of all, no one really wants to talk about your oral care habits in public. Most people, like, cringe and also kind of have a little bit of fear and anxiety or shame around their oral care. The co-founder at Flaus said anytime I told people about it, they would like immediately not want to smile, or, you know, and that's such a thing about oral care. And so a big part of what we wanted to do from a brand perspective and a storytelling perspective was to kind of break down some of the stigma around oral care, and that really does exist, and break down some of the fear. And the way we did that was through designing a brand that makes people laugh. And so, you know, one of the tagline that I came up with was good oral. Like, Flaus gives good oral. You know, it's a little edgy, it kind of makes you smile, and it like makes you, you know, if you see it on a billboard, you're like, whoa. But I think at the end of the day, like we really tried to, you know, especially bring our brand positioning or story was a world of flossability. It was a world of flossability, and we have a whole heap of great puns in our back pocket. But it was the idea of making something that's kind of a really mundane and honestly this thing that no one does. The way that Flaus came to be was my co-founder Samantha, she was a corporate attorney at the time, and she had her annual dentist appointment coming up on her calendar, and a week before she's like, oh, I gotta start flossing. And she's like, flosses manically for a week, and then she goes into the dentist's office, and they're like, have you been flossing? She's like, yes. And they're like, no, you haven't. There's blood everywhere. You have 10 cavities, and here's a dental bill for like $10,000. It's America. And she was like, man, I've got to be a better way. I love my electric toothbrush. I'll just go online and buy an electric flosser. And it didn't exist, which was shocking. So, you know, I think at the end of the day, what we were trying to solve in designing and bringing that product to life was that it's something that we all know we should be doing. 80% of Americans knew they should be flossing every day, but only 30% did it. So.
I actually went to the dentist this week because of this. It was a good reminder. And I'm that person that feels awkward when they're talking to dentists, so I can imagine, I'm like, I don't want to talk to you with my teeth visible. What took Flaus from the Indiegogo campaign to the more mature sort of brand that it became?
I mean, a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. The questions of 0 to 1 in building is kind of the same no matter what business you're doing, which is why as an investor I love helping founders now answer those questions of 0 to 1, which is like, who is this really for? We thought we created this product for people who don't floss, but actually, when we did a bunch of customer research, we realized that we created this product for people who love flossing, but want a better way to do it. They had already bought into it, and maybe they already had an electric toothbrush, so they also already bought into a device that allowed them to do it better, faster, cleaner, or whatever. There's a lot of customer research along the way. The first 100 minutes that we had come off the line, we put straight into an at-home 4-week ethnographic customer research study where we had people take selfie videos every single day using the product and tell us what they loved, what they hated, and then we redesigned the whole thing from the ground up based on their feedback. Retooled it, redid it. We understood that to make this product successful, sunk cost fallacy is such a challenging thing as founders. When you're faced with feedback, in order for this to become the thing that we want it to be, we understand that we really do need to pivot and to change course. And we ended up, redoing it from the ground up, retooling and everything with that feedback.
In terms of customer research, I think it's one of the hardest things to do as a startup. What are some tips you have around customer research? You've had a long legacy in this.
No matter what, doing some customer research is better than none. So even if you don't have the funds to do a full 4-week ethnographic research study at home with a researcher that you happen to still know from your Ogilvy days, you should find a way to do it with friends or family, even if that's the way that you can. But there are lots of different ways. I mean, we did like surveys, we did online surveys, we did that ethnographic research, we did stuff with our investors. It was COVID, so people didn't really want to put a flosser in their mouth at that time. At one point, we did try to do like a guerrilla on the ground, like out on the Venice boardwalk with like a flosser. People were like, "Get away from me!" We were like, "Okay." Not that way. It was not successful. But my point is that you got to try lots of different ways, and you have to constantly be revisiting your data. That's something that I always say to founders now as an investor is you make the best decision that you can with the data that you have today, and as you gather more data down the line, your decisions might change, just like ours did, and we retooled the product, and that's great. More data, new decisions, there's no shame in changing it. In fact, the best way to go around that sunk cost fallacy is FOMO, to think about if we don't pivot, what opportunity are we going to potentially miss out on? And so the best way to do that is to keep gathering customer research as you go.
Yeah, I love that. FOMO is a great way to angle it, to get yourself out there. Now your role as an investor, your principal investor at Side Stage Ventures, your first investment was in Magic Brief. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
So Magic Brief is an end-to-end platform for creative performance marketing. So it helps marketers gather inspiration, see what is out there in their competitive set, see what other industries are doing, kind of like a Pinterest board, gather all those pieces of inspiration, then put together your creative brief, who you want to work with, what you want to do, what you want to get out of it, what is your KPIs for success, brief your actual creative partners for the content, deploy it out onto whatever platform you're using, let's say Meta, get the data back, get your insights through AI, augmented insights, and then do the whole thing all over again. So Magic Brief was a wonderful first investment for me at Side Stage because it was obviously so close to home based on my experience both as a founder and consumer, especially in D2C in the States, as well as a marketer at Ogilvy and a designer. But at the end of the day, early stage investing is all about the founder. And George, a founder of Magic Brief, has such a strong vision about bringing brand and performance marketing together, which inherently, if you know anything about the industry, kind of in the past have been seen as like working against each other, which they really don't. They're 100% hand in hand. Every piece of advertising is part of your brand, and your brand should be driving performance. The first time I met George, the founder, we really connected across that value set. And like I said, early stage investing is about believing in the founder that you're backing, or founders that you're backing, because you know that it's not going to be a linear path. So when you back them, you trust them to make the best decisions they can with the data they have.
Can I say how refreshing it is to have an investor that understands marketing and brand? Because my first startup was a marketing tech startup, and like, oh my god, it was so different in Australia versus the US. People in the US got it like this, people in Australia, not so much. So thank you, and please, welcome, stay for as long as you want here.
I'm too, I love it here.
Great. So, like, marketing startups as well as consumer startups aren't big in Australia. What's the appetite in the US like?
Well, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. So the US market, the Australian market is what, like 5% the size of the US market? And, you know, so inherently when you have a consumer demand that is that much bigger, it's easier to build consumer brands or consumer businesses at scale. So the way venture capital works is the power law. If you haven't heard about the power law, what it means is that you're investing, it's high risk investing. So you have to believe when you make an investment early on that any investment that you make can be sort of that one that we say like return, that one big investment that is going to be hyper successful. And because of the market economics at that time, especially with a lot of offshore manufacturing, which might change in years to come, we'll see, yet to be seen. I think the reason it worked was a moment in time where the cost of manufacturing was low, the market size was high, and the unit economics, especially with the advent of D2C, meant that you could acquire customers at a cheaper rate than you could in the past. So all of that kind of came together into this like really special moment that meant that, you know, consumer investing could be venture scale investing. It's changed a lot since 2020 in the US for a number of reasons. One being the changes in privacy laws in iOS, two being increasing in online shopping because of COVID, and both of which increased competition, well, one of which made it more difficult for advertisers to understand who they're advertising to, more costly to acquire, the next of which increased your competition online to sell online, increase your customer acquisition costs. And all of that just means that generally the customer acquisition costs have increased in the States. So if that's the case, it doesn't necessarily, it's made it harder. The way I'll put it is that in the States, it's made it, valuations have come down for consumer founders, which has been tough, along with the macroeconomic environment of 2022, where valuations in general came down. Having said that, it does seem like there's another kind of a new boost of excitement with sort of advent of AI in the space that might be kind of reinvigorating a bit. Now, in terms of Australia, in the past, because of all of those things, you know, Australia, what it didn't have was the size, the market size, and it was really hard for consumer founders to be able to sort of like export their brand or their business outside of Australia in a really scalable way. And you know, the other thing I should say is just that tech companies historically have a higher multiple because, you know, it's easier, it's less cash intensive to be able to scale and grow a tech company, and that's why venture capital investors love tech companies. They love investing in tech companies because the multiple's higher, it's easier to bring that to scale and get that kind of power law venture scale. Whereas consumer brands and consumer businesses are more cash intensive, so your multiple on the business to make it valuable for an investor is actually lower. Those are the kinds of dynamics that I think aren't really talked about. People just say, oh, investors don't like to invest in consumer here. Well, there's a reason that has happened in the past. Now, having said that, the flip side is a couple of things. Interestingly, the US market loves Australian culture, loves Australian design, and there are a lot of great Australian founders who've gone and like launched Australian brands in the US, not even launched them here, and that's such a shame, such missing out on this opportunity here in this market. So I think that it's a really interesting time. Investors, the VC market here in Australia is also maturing, and you know, some of the bigger multi-stage funds are really starting to now expand their investment portfolio and see other investment opportunities outside of just traditionally B2B SaaS, which, confirmation bias. We've seen a bunch of B2B SaaS businesses work and succeed here in Australia, so we keep investing in them, but we're starting to see more investment outside of that now.
There's so much to unpack there. It's true. It's not because they don't want to invest, it's the numbers. Yeah. And it's the multiple that you can achieve on that.
Yeah, and I think, look, there's also the interesting thing, what I always say to founders is that, like, being positioned in Australia is such an amazing advantage. You're in APAC. You have access to this entire market that American founders don't even dream of touching until Series B+. You have access here in this market that is so unique. With geopolitical changes, we'll have to see how this kind of evolves. I would say before last month, my typical response would be that globalization means that it's getting easier and easier to build consumer brands abroad that may happen to be founded here, but like we can look at amazing Australian consumer brands, Aesop, Zimmerman, Who Gives a Crap, like there's so many that, have gone into become global brands. And so it can be done.
And a lot of them have recently had exits in Australia, which is promising news. So do you think the tides are changing even in Australia?
Yeah, I think, look, when I think about the exits is that what's so wonderful to me about this market and this ecosystem, something that I absolutely love, is that when Australian brands and businesses, if you think about it, go and gather these consumer dollars from all over the world and funnel them into like this tiny, relatively tiny market. And these businesses, whether it's tech companies like Atlassian, Canva, Afterpay, or consumer brands and businesses that have just listed, have this talent that's kind of grown up in these Australian businesses, and these, now this talent pool is also spinning off out of these companies and starting the next generation of great Australian brands and businesses. This is, I would say that those exits really, it's like if you think about it kind of like a garden, like there's a couple early little seedlings or saplings that have now grown and are like pollinating this garden with that next generation of plants and with talent and newly minted capital through those exits to create that next generation. I think it's a really special time for that. Actually, I think the Australian ecosystem and market is really uniquely positioned in this particular moment for a lot of growth.
I've seen a lot of those people working at startups coming out and starting their own company, which is a great sign of times to come.
Yeah.
How much of your life do you believe you've created, curated, or chanced upon?
Oh my gosh, well, I believe that luck is a combination of three things. I believe luck is a combination of, first and foremost, your privilege. I think you're born into a situation that you cannot control, but luckily that's not as important as the other two, but I think it's really important to recognize. And then secondly, it is the height of the goals that you set for yourself. You're only ever going to achieve the height of the goal that you set for yourself. And even if you set it really high, you might just miss it, but you'll still achieve higher than if you set it low. And then lastly, I think the most important one is like shots on goal, which is just, frequency. I wouldn't be Canadian if I didn't quote Wayne Gretzky, so you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, which I think for me is true. Like, I think that's the way that I'm fortunate. I was fortunate to be born in Canada. I was fortunate to be born into a family that taught me entrepreneurship. I was fortunate to be, all of those things. I'm deeply grateful for it. I recognize that privilege, but also I then went out and took so many shots. And, someone told me that I wouldn't get the Fulbright. I applied anyways. I got it. And, you never know. If you don't ask, you never know what might come out of it. So.
Thank you so much, Ellie. You're a bundle of insights, and I could just keep talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Startup Power Show. If you had a blast listening to this episode, come on board and join our incredible cheer squad. Spread the startup love by sharing the episode with your friends, leave us a review, or drop us your valuable feedback, comments, or burning questions. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll shine the spotlight on another startup superstar. I'm Preeti Mohan, and I look forward to seeing you next time.